Help me to stay competitive against the big multinational corporations by subscribing to this channel, hitting the notification bell, liking the video, and maybe leaving a comment in the comment sections below. Thank you very much and enjoy the video. Greetings, free thinkers. Welcome to the Hoggcast. Okay, on this episode we have yet more footage for you on the ground that the mainstream media refuse to show you from Greece. We also at the end have some footage that's taken last week from Paris during the Congolese refugees, or Congolese alleged refugees are actually economic migrants who were rioting for spurious reasons, who burnt central Paris down to the ground. So we'll have some of that footage basically to show you why the ever-increasing numbers of refugees and people who are posing as refugees are being resisted in the West. There comes a time where people have just had enough and they say, look, enough. We don't want any more. We cannot take any more. Maybe it's someone else's turn to share the burden, to share the load. But that's coming after. First, we're going to go straight to the borders of Greece and in the east to the borders of Turkey, where Europe and Turkey meet. And we're going to see just the lengths that the Turkish President Erdogan has gone to betray us, because he has gone back on every promise he made. We paid him taxpayers' money, or I should say the politicians paid them taxpayers' money on our behalf to stick to an agreement we all in the alternative media knew they were never going to stick to. Anyway, enough of my rambling. Let's get into the video. Okay, so what you're seeing on your screen now is the result of Turkish President Erdogan and his decision to open the borders, which, by the way, was something he promised not to do after the European Union paid him with our taxpayers' money, many billions of euros, to stop this exactly what you're seeing on your screen from happening. But the Turkish president has proven more than once that he is not to be trusted and that he will betray us as and when he chooses. And what you're seeing on your screen clearly is an invasion force. By any metric you want to use, this is an invasion force. Okay, so what you just saw there was after the recent events in Turkey where Erdogan allowed the borders to open and the people that he's been holding back up until now, which by the way was his end of the agreement, to stream through into Europe. And you saw some tear gas being fired by the border guards in Eastern Europe and down in Greece in the south. Bearing in mind, Greece has been referred to, and this is a point of view that I agree with, Greece has recently been referred to as Europe's shield, which is exactly what it is. Bearing in mind, Greece does not need to do this because the people who are streaming across, who by the way are almost exclusively men of military age. Yes, there are some women and there are some children, but most of the time they're at the back. They're only a small, tiny minority, and they're only brought to the front when the gullible Western media, the mainstream media, are present, because it's a photo shoot and it is an opportunity to spin the narrative into something that favours their position and benefits them. But they are the rule, the exception. The women and children are the exception. The rule is military age men. And all of us on the right of politics, we always focus on the rule. Leftists and people on the left of politics generally only ever focus on the exception. Sorry to go way off course, but take the abortion situations, for example. The rule is generally speaking that when a woman has an abortion, it is because she has had maybe a lightning whirlwind romance. Maybe she was drunk and she engaged in something that she regretted in the morning. That is the rule. Women generally go for abortions because of just ordinary things like that. The exception is women who were assaulted by men and then found themselves pregnant and have to get an abortion. And that is something that the left always focuses on, that particular thing there. The reason why I'm telling you this is because it perfectly highlights the difference in the way us on the right focus on the rule and those on the left focus on the exception. Anyway, as I said, that is clearly, in my opinion, a makeshift army. That's what it is. It is essentially large numbers of military-age men streaming across a border illegally without permission and essentially invading a country that does not want them there. Now, of course, their invasion has finally been met with some stiff resistance by the Greek authorities, who, as you've seen by the footage just shared, just what you watched a moment ago there, those are Greek regular infantrymen from the Greek army going to the borders, because that is how grave and how serious the situation is right now. But at least they are responding to it in a timely and measured fashion, and at least they have that mentality. As in the West here in Britain, you won't see no army being deployed in Britain. On the contrary, if anything, the police will be deployed to stop people like us from saying so-called hurty-feely words. Anyway, I want to get on to the next piece of footage, in which you are going to see, in stark contrast to our values in the West, you're going to see what the length they will go to frame the narrative in a particular way. What you're about to see is people who are trying to cross the Greek border to make the way to the West. Now, tear gas has been used. As you saw in the footage of the quote-unquote invasion force, those what looked like smoke canisters were actually tear gas. Now, tear gas has been used to quell some violence, and if you watched my previous video on Greece, you will see that there has been a lot of violent conflict and a lot of violence directed at the border guards, and tear gas has had to be used. Bearing that in mind, tear gas has not been used on women and children. There are hardly any women and children there. That being said, the footage you're about to see is of some of the people who are trying to get into Europe. They hold their own children over a fire to get smoke in their eyes, to run up to the Western media who are present, the leftists and the NGOs, and say, look, our children have been tear gassed. Look at how terrible this situation is. In fact, the child, who clearly doesn't know what's going on, even gets coached by a woman who I presume is the mother. Anyway, don't take my word for it. Watch it yourself.
To go to the Europe, to every country that accepts us. You don't want to stay in your country. You love your country. Your country is a way for us. It's a bridge for us to move to Europe. We cannot go back. Don't ask us that. Don't ask us to go back.
That is it, isn't it? Down. When you get down to the nitty gritty, they essentially want to get to the West. Now, Greece does have their own migration problems, and they have high migration rates, just like all Western countries. Or I appreciate Greece is on the Mediterranean, but it is essentially a Western country in terms of culture and society. And the amount of negative press they're getting by the mainstream media and by these leftist broadcasting companies and the NGOs and the Soros-funded groups, etc., the amount of heat they're getting really triggers me in a way, because they are doing this primarily for us in the West. As you saw on the footage you just watched, the gentleman there says that Greece is a bridge. He says they're not going to go back. You can't ask us that. We're going forwards, and that's it. Of course, we're apparently supposed to just accept that as if that he is judge, jury, and executioner, and he's laying down the law to us. However, I would also ask you just to rewind and watch it again and look at the makeup of the people there, you'll find that a lot of these so-called Syrian refugees are actually of Nigerian appearance, Somali appearance, Sudanese appearance. So you can clearly see that there are a lot of economic migrants posing as refugees in and amongst these, however many of them are actually legit refugees. Now, the footage you saw just then was not from Greece or from Turkey. It was from France, and it was taken over. It was a couple of weeks old now, the footage, but the reason why it's relevant to my story or in the video you're watching is because the reason why people are trying to stem the tide of migration, it has nothing to do with the R word. It has nothing to do with being this ism or that phobic or this, that and the other. It has everything to do with the fact that they are behaving in ways we just don't find acceptable. It's the only way I can really put it, the safest way I can put it for the YouTube algorithm, in that what you just saw there was Congolese migrants, or the result of the Congolese migrants, and what they did to central Paris a couple of weeks ago, in which they burnt significant sections of streets and boulevards down to the ground, essentially. And all of those cars you saw and those motorbikes and the property you saw burned out, they belonged to French people, okay? They probably saved up for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years for their dream car. It's probably a 17-year-old boy's first motorbike, and it's been torched and destroyed, burnt to the ground. Every one of those you saw in that chain, there is a human story behind that. The cars, the motorbikes, the properties, the people behind that are real people. They have feelings, they have... You know, they feel pain. People tend to forget things like that. People tend to focus on, when it comes to migration and the refugee crisis, they tend to focus on, oh, the humanity, and we must do what we can to help the refugees. But they often, and refugees should be helped, but where do you draw the line? Because when they do things like this, you have to question, are they really refugees? We know a lot of them are actually economic migrants, but then you also have to ask, do we necessarily need people who behave like that in our societies? It has nothing to do with this ism or that phobic or etc, whatever label you want to put on it. It has nothing to do with that to ask those questions. And those questions should be asked, and where necessary, a solution must be found and actually enacted.
Les siècles au milieu du marché libre. Ça part du 15e là-bas, et puis là c'est capitaine Jazz, le 14e, ça rejoint le boulevard Daniel Castellois. C'est immonde, c'est dégueulasse.
mairie de Marseille s'était engagée par la voix de Caroline Posmontier, il a eu les moyens d'avoir la police sur ça, les douanes, ils n'ont jamais rien fait. Jamais rien fait. Celles et ceux qui nous parlent de cadre de vie, les Godin, les Bassa, les compagnies, voilà le cadre de vie des habitants.
That final piece of footage you saw there encapsulates perfectly the failure of multiculturalism. You can see just vast swathes of rubbish and trash littering everywhere. Nobody seems to care, nobody's bothered, apart from the homegrown native French people. You see those makeshift stalls set up all across the place selling all kinds of stuff, most likely either homemade or stolen, certainly illegitimate. I very much doubt any of those have street vendor permits like the native-born French people have to get. The police certainly aren't going to shut them down because they would simply refuse to have them shut down, and then you're going to end up in what is essentially a street battle over what is essentially a second-hand car boot store, because that's the problem. They are always willing to go the whole way. They have proven that they are willing to go the whole way over a street stall. So it's just allowed to happen. Over traditional French architecture, you have what is essentially a Somalian street market over the top. The left will applaud this, but the fact of the matter remains that when one of the best and most truthful sayings is, when in Rome, live like the Romans do. Or if you can't live like the Romans do, at least have some respect for Rome and the Romans. That's something that I'm afraid to say has been lost. That message has been lost and diluted down as time goes on. Now, at the time of recording this, it has reached my attention that, and the facts are still coming out, but it's reached my ears that apparently a Greek Coast Guard vessel has tipped over one of these refugee dinghies in the ocean, spilling out the people inside into the ocean, and allegedly, I don't have any proof, but allegedly one refugee woman has died. Now, if that is the case, that is appalling and should never have happened. Two wrongs don't make a right. Tipping one boat over and spilling the refugees inside out into the ocean is not going to solve the refugee crisis, is not going to help anything in any way. That being said, it is time to recognise that tempers are fraying and people's patience and tolerance, quite frankly, is running out, because at the end of the day, how on earth are we expected to tolerate the intolerance of us? Thank you for watching this video. By all means, keep sending me your footage of what's happening on the ground. It's very much appreciated. Please share this video so I can keep competitive with the mainstream media who tries to silence alternative media and alternative voices such as ours. Thank you for watching, free thinkers, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you and goodbye.